All right, hopefully we're good now. Always love technical difficulties. So thank you for coming to the Cinder project update. I'm Jay Bryant. I think it looks like most of the people here already know me. So, and if I say anything wrong, you guys can correct me. But we'll just run through quickly what we've done during the Queens release. And what we're working on in Rocky, and then after that, this flows into our onboarding session, which hopefully we'll have some new people visiting to learn about Cinder through that. So that's the plan for today. So the usual slide, what does Cinder do? It's a block service system, block storage service for OpenStack, obviously. Follows the usual OpenStack design, where you've got a Cinder API and scheduler that talks over a message bus to one or more volume services, and those volume services can then manage one or more storage backends. So should be familiar to most people, and if not, we can talk more about that. Currently, we had 211 contributors in Queens. I've been pretty happy to see that number stay really pretty consistent, somewhere between 205 and 215, 230 contributors each release. So we've got a good, strong development community that continues to be a part of it. This picture was from the PTG in Dublin, and it was snowing, which doesn't normally happen there. And it was cold, but hey, we still got a picture done. So unfortunately not down on the football pitch like so many of the other teams. And then, the usage survey, we're in 89% of deployments, and most of those are actually in production, and only 3% of those only reported being in test. So I know we're in production at CERN, a lot of other good places, and it seems to be going well, don't have too many complaints. Hopefully we can keep it that way. So as I said, we'll walk through what we got working in Queens and what we're planning to do for Rocky. And starting with Queens, of course. So we had some new drivers make it into the tree for Queens, starting with Data Core, their SAN Symphony and Hyperconverged virtual SAN storage. So that was good to get them on board. They'd been working on getting their driver merged for a while. And Inspur got their iSCSI driver in, and the QNAP driver was added back in. We had a few that in previous releases we'd backed out because they were, their CIs weren't reporting, they weren't maintained. So we marked them unsupported, and then they worked on getting their code back in place and CI running. There are several more coming in Rocky. We've gotten a couple merged, and I think we'll probably end up with 3 new ones in Rocky. I think that's what it's looking like. Multi-attach, woohoo! Everybody celebrate. Had a really, so this was a really interesting discussion that we had earlier today in one of our forum sessions, because this is something that John Griffith and Ildiko Vancha have been working on getting in place for 3 years now, and we're like, do we really need to do this? And everybody in the room said, yes, you do need to do this. So it's good that it's there. So we do it through a volume type. So you need to, one, have a backend that supports volume multi-attach, so it will report up through capabilities. We have 5 of them right now: LVM, SolidFire, I think Inspur, and there are a couple other ones that support multi-attach, and then you set in your volume type that you want to allow multi-attach, and then you are able to attach that volume to multiple instances simultaneously. There's no limit that we set on how many instances it can be attached to. It's basically, whatever your backend will support and how many the host that it's attaching to will support as far as devices. So that's working. You can set policies. This is kind of important if you're moving to this from a administrator perspective. There's a volume multi-attach policy that you can set to either enable it or disable it. So if you don't want your users to be able to do this, you can set that to false. And also Separately, if you want to allow doing multi-attach of bootable volumes, there's a separate policy for that if you want to enable or disable it. So I think that covers everything on that. You need to have Microversion 3.50 for it. And then obviously you need to have a version of Nova that also has multi-attach support in it. So basically you need to be at Queens for both Nova and Cinder for this to work. Default policies and code. This was kind of a push that's been around and is a move for, I think, most projects right now. I think the TC mandated it, in fact. But for those of you that have Cinder installs, you probably saw in Etsy Cinder a policy.json file where you would set, where all the policies for functions were specified. We now have moved all of that specification into the code, and you only have to have the policy JSON file for things that you want different from the default. So it makes it a little clearer what you have set in your environment apart from the defaults, and makes it a little easier to maintain. But that's a upgrade thing as you're moving to Queens that you're going to want to be aware of. Backend state to service list. So this was kind of one of those things, people were like, okay, I can see if my volume service is up and down, but I can't tell if my volume service is talking to a functional backend. So this adds the ability for drivers to actually, report back up in the service list, not only, okay, is the service up, but is the service able to work with the backend and is it functioning properly? So this just makes it a little easier for, if you're getting people complaining that they can't create volumes, you're not sure why, you do a service list and it's like, well, the service is running, but it says, hey, the backend isn't talking to me. It's a good flag that there's a problem there that needs to be addressed before you can continue on, and it'll hopefully save with debug time, especially in larger environments with many backends. Doing work to get moved over to Barbican, which is good for encryption, obviously. We added the ability to migrate fixed keys that were configured over to Barbican. There's a job that will run when you bring up the volume service, and in the case that it finds that there are fixed keys in the database, it moves them over to Barbican and then will report in the logs. So if you are doing this and you want to make sure it worked properly, you can check your logs after the first time you start up with Queens and make sure that it's reported a successful migration of your keys. So what else? Create volume from backup. This was one I was kind of surprised we didn't already have, but now we have it. I think, was that you, Yvonne, that did that? No?
I think it was Tommy.
Oh, it's Tommy, yes. Good. So now you can, just like you would create a volume from an image, you can also specify a backup ID, and it'll take a backup and take that image and create the volume from it again. So it's another way to restore your volumes after you lose them, or, kind of the hard way to do snapshotting, but if you prefer to do that way, you can do that too. So just continue to use the create command. Did we get this into the OpenStack CLI? If not, we should make sure we do. Do you know? Okay. To do for me to check and make sure we also got it into the OpenStack CLI, because sometimes we forget things like that. Okay, so this is another problem we were kind of left lingering around for a while, is we didn't run all of our commands that impacted how much space was actually being used on the back-end storage through the scheduler. And so this is part of what we started fixing in Queens, is making sure that, excuse me, whenever we have a command that could create a snapshot or do a replica or something like that, where we're going to consume more space on the back end, that we run it through the scheduler and make sure that we're not going to be breaking rules, especially if you're doing like thin provisioning that would exhaust the space on the storage back end. We're continuing to do more documentation and improvement on this in Rocky. but we're, at least at this point, we have better functionality in this space, a little more consistent behavior, and you're not going to end up running out of space and not being able to tell why. And then just the list of microversion changes here. I won't bore you with all of them. Believe it or not, this was fewer microversions than we've had in the past. And some of them are kind of no-ops, like the shared targets was part of what was needed to do the multi-attach. And then the final one that actually added multi-attach. Metadata, yeah. So these slides will be available for your reference if you want to look through them. Or we've got the link there at the bottom to where all of the API microversion information is at. So priorities for Rocky. So usual disclaimer, this is what we talked about at the PTG. We're making progress as we work through things here at the summit. And I've been working a little more in our meetings, I don't know successfully, but trying to be successful. Guiding the work and the time, making sure that we know what the priorities are and that we're working towards them and doing the reviews. So I think we're in a good pace to get most of what we've planned to do done. Fingers crossed. But we are kind of already halfway through Rocky. I'm like, how'd we get here? Gosh, it goes so quickly. I track the work that we're doing in this Cinder spec review tracking Etherpad. Same call to you developers in the room as always, please keep it updated. It helps me a lot when you guys are doing that, so it's appreciated. So let's see how our actual mileage is as I go through these. So we talked about this earlier today in a session, HA documentation and fixes. So when we're talking HA, we're talking active-active for the API scheduler and volume processes. It's something we've been trying to get to. It can work. It works active-passive just fine, but we would like to get to the point where it can be active-active for all the processes. And there's some challenges with each of the different vendors that we're working on, getting their drivers tested and verified as far as that goes. We're also trying to figure out how we handle, if the trick is if something goes down in the middle of a crate or what have you, there are race conditions where the scheduler is not going to be accurate. So we want to make sure we do this carefully. The trick right now is getting it documented is where we're going to try to start at as to, best practices, what's recommended, not recommended, and then putting a test suite together. So this one's not progressing as quickly as I hoped, but I think after the discussion we had today that we may be able to make some good progress there. Improve replication promotion support. So we've had the ability to have replication enabled for backends that support it for some time. And so your data is replicated. You can have volume types that you ensure go onto replicated backends. But now, what happens after your backend crashes? Good question. So this is kind of where we're working to make it easier. Right now there's some, and this is documented out in our documentation, you need to do some manual changes in the storage, in the database to indicate which storage is the backend is the primary versus the secondary as far as the hosts go. We want to update the Cinder manage command so that you don't have to go hack stuff by hand. So that one we're making progress on. I hope that we'll see it in Rocky. Signature verification. So this is kind of a cool one. If you have an image that's got a signature in it, we're going to be setting it up so that you can check at the time that you use that image to create a volume that it has the same signature, so you know you're getting the same data that you're expecting out of that image and you don't have a man-in-the-middle type attack or something like that. It'll be something that you can enable or disable. If it's enabled, then it will automatically happen. If there's a signature there doesn't have to be one. Obviously, if there isn't one, it just won't do it. So it'll be a new option in cinder.conf to enable that, and we should see that coming in Rocky. support for availability zones in the volume type. So we're working on this to see if we can get it so that when you have a volume type and you want to specify that it go to a particular availability zone, we'll be able to add that to the volume type. So it'll also be a way that you can tell what storage is available in what part of your cloud. So this could be kind of a good improvement, especially as clouds start getting bigger and you have multiple zones, but not necessarily the same storage across all of them. It gives the administrators some control there over where storage is going to. And this is another one that kind of follows on with that idea. As we've had OpenStack around longer, clouds are aging out. You need to be able to take storage that you maybe want to end of life. And so we'll be able to have the option for administrators to say, hey, I don't want this backend to be able to create any more storage. You may be able to still snapshot or clone, but I don't want new volumes going to that storage. Or perhaps you have storage where you don't want people snapshotting things for whatever reason. We'll give the admins more granular control over what they're allowed to do on a storage backend as far as functionality. So that's hopefully coming along in Rocky. And then just kind of some other notes on stuff we've been working on. Automatic config generation. Sean's put some good patches in place that make it so that we had static include files for our documentation for the config options, which is not ideal for keeping information up to date. Also, if any of you have wanted to go and see what backend supports what functionality and you've seen our support matrix, it's kind of a nightmare. I'm creating a in-code solution for that shows what each of the different volume backends will support. And then, as I mentioned, continued schedule improvements. And then we've had in the pipeline for a while transferring snapshots with volumes. We'll see if we can get that in, but that one's kind of moving slowly. But that's another thing we're looking at getting in Rocky. Reference links, we've got our release notes for Queens. Please take a look at those if you're interested. Of course, our Launchpad where you can see bugs and blueprints. We've got the wiki, which is at least a good landing page to start for development. And our YouTube channel, where you can get recordings of some of our forum sessions and discussions from the PTG and stuff are all out there. So please visit that. And that's it, with 1 minute to spare. Any questions? Yeah.
For the clusters to report back the status,
Mm-hmm.
along with the volume service status.
Yeah.
Is that driver dependent, or does it need any special configuration? Or does it just by default it's enabled in Queens?
It's going to require some driver interaction to add that ability. So that's going to be one of those things that we need to push. I'm not sure how many drivers have implemented that yet, so we're going to need to kind of push people to start working on that. So, other questions? Yeah.
So, with the added OpenStack 13,
Mm-hmm.
which is an added,
Yep.
you require now to have Cinder and vanilla to be containerized.
Yeah.
Something that happens outside of that as well?
For Cinder, it's kind of a no-op. Cinder really works just fine containerized. I know there was concern about some of the services being able to support that, but I think that's going to work well for Cinder from a containerized environment.
But do you see this happening with other distributions or with upstream in general?
I'm not sure. I can't speak for other distributions. I can't speak for Red Hat either, but I think that we will, given the state of technology, I think it's likely that we'll see a move in that direction just for security and implementation. So, well, we're out of time. I got to wrap up. Thank you for coming. Please come to the onboarding session, which I think is next in here, where we'll go into a little more detail about Cinder if you're not familiar with it. Thanks.